There's no doubt I think the Democrats have really fallen in love with the monopoly power of these companies. And if you listen to those hearings and cover them as you did, what you hear over and over is the Democrats saying the companies ought to censor more.
Yeah.
They got to use their power more aggressively. I mean, they're no longer worried about the concentration of power. They're basically cheering the companies on and then threatening to regulate them if the companies don't get more censorious, which is sort of hard to imagine.
I'm Dave Rubin, and joining me today is the junior senator from the great state of Missouri and the author of the new book, The Tyranny of Big Tech, Senator Josh Hawley. Welcome to the Rubin Report.
Thanks for having me.
Senator, what are the chances that this video is not going to be algorithmically depressed by YouTube? Do we have any chance that anyone's going to see this thing?
I don't know. Given my history with big tech, maybe not, but we'll keep our fingers crossed.
I've got a similar history with big tech. So I want to start by, I just literally in the last 5 minutes as we sat down with you, I saw two headlines that I thought, okay, these are perfect to tee up for the senator. So Breitbart is just reporting in the last couple minutes that, I'll read you the exact tweet. Twitter is reportedly developing a feature to make users reconsider sending messages that its system detects as, quote, mean. I suspect that will include a lot of your stuff.
Well, I suspect what will happen is, well, first of all, if they actually enforce that, wouldn't that shut down all of Twitter? I mean, I thought
that's it for Twitter.
Twitter seems to subsist on, but of course, in practice, I'm sure that will mean that conservatives and libertarians, that their tweets are all silenced, and the left can go on with the hate mongering as long as they like. That's usually how it works.
Yeah, that pretty much is it. And then this other one, which seems obvious, and I actually warned that this was going to be coming. Twitter is now, so this is from Becker News, Twitter is now suspending users who share Donald Trump's statements. So as you know, Trump launched, in effect, a blog. It wasn't sort of, people were saying he was going to come out with this big platform. Apparently that's not it. But he launched this thing with just buttons that could send stuff to Twitter and Facebook. Now they're actually deleting accounts that just link to his stuff.
Yeah, that's just it's unbelievable, and their determination to completely silence and erase and cancel the former president of the United States. It's just shocking, and the fact that they have the power, the monopoly power, to do this and to get by with it, and that there's nowhere else the former president can go. I mean, think about this: former president of the United States had 78 and 80 million followers or something on Twitter, and many more on the other platforms, and there's no alternative for him to go. He's got to try and create his own thing. I mean, that tells you something about the monopoly power of these companies.
Okay, so let's start right at the heart of it, because you are a constitutional conservative. And at least as far as I know, we're still governed by the Constitution, although I'm not quite sure these days. But I know that a lot of people, every time you say, okay, we've got to do something about big tech, they say, well, what do you mean? They're private companies and we should just leave them alone. What is your argument against that?
Well, listen, a monopoly is a threat to the free market and also a threat to liberty. I mean, this is the problem for those of us who believe in free market capitalism, is that monopoly stifles competition. Monopoly raises barriers to entry, raises barriers to new entrants into the market, slows down innovation, and of course gives the holders of the monopoly incredible power in politics. And we're seeing that now with these big tech companies. So I would just say to those who consider themselves defenders of the free market, to those who consider themselves defenders of capitalism, that it is incumbent upon us to dismantle monopolies so that the market can function, we can have more competition, consumers can have more choice. Bottom line politically is our framers understood monopoly and liberty do not go together, and we've got to recover that understanding.
Do you think in some sense, though, the ship has just kind of sailed here? You know, I covered all the hearings. Obviously, you were very involved in all of those. And when Trump was in power, there was this idea that, oh, maybe something's going to happen. But at this point, Biden's in charge and the Democrats are in charge. And it's like, well, why would they do anything on this stuff? Because it's helping them.
Yeah, there's no doubt I think the Democrats have really fallen in love with the monopoly power of these companies. And if you listen to those hearings and cover them as you did, what you hear over and over is the Democrats saying the companies ought to censor more.
Yeah.
They got to use their power more aggressively. I mean, they're no longer worried about the concentration of power. They're basically cheering the companies on and then threatening to regulate them if the companies don't get more censorious, which is sort of hard to imagine. But I do think that the Democrats have really given up on the monopoly question because they've come to love it. But that doesn't mean that the conservatives have to. I mean, we have to now more than ever get back to our founders' understanding that monopoly and liberty are not compatible. And what we need is more competition. What we need is to return power and control to the American people. That includes control over your own speech, control over your own personal information, your personal data. And I think we've got to be bold in pushing forward reforms and legislative proposals that will do that.
Why do you think Trump didn't move on this? You know, there was this threat of doing something about Section 230 of the Communications Act that we've covered a million times before, but nothing happened. What do you think was the holdup there?
I think that really the White House didn't get focused on it, and the president, I think, did not begin to really push it until it was in an election season, and it was very hard then at that point to galvanize Congress into action. But also, the real sticking point was never the White House. It was always Congress. And a lot of, listen, when I came to the Senate just 2 years ago, and I began proposing to reform, overhaul Section 230, to break up these monopolies, I couldn't find very many takers on my side of the aisle. I mean, there were very, very few Republicans who wanted to be associated with that or involved with that. And so I think you just didn't have a lot of enthusiasm, and that's because Republican elected officials were a lot of the times out of step with their own voters. Their own voters were saying, wow, these companies have too much power. They are radical left. They are censoring speech. They are shutting down our speech in the democratic process, interfering with it. But you said Republicans who weren't willing to move on it. I think that that is changing. But as you say, the last 4 years were really a missed opportunity for Republicans in that respect. And now we've got to make up for lost time. And we can do that by being bold with our thinking, bold in our proposals, and go to the American people with an agenda to trust bust here in the 21st century.
But do you fear that now that the Democrats are in charge, that if they were to do anything about all of this, that it would actually just be worse? Because you made the point. They were basically saying, hey, if you guys don't regulate speech, we're going to punish you. I mean, that's basically what AOC said to Zuckerberg. And he pretty much was like, well, I can't do that. I'm not God. But now that they have the power, like, it's hard for me to envision basically them using that power to expand freedom.
Yes, I agree with you. And I think this is one of the reasons why I'm very, very skeptical of increasing government regulation over the companies, especially the way the Democrats want to. You know, Democrats want to further regulate the speech content that's on the web and that's on these platforms. I mean, that's what they really want to do. And they want to tell the companies that you need to define this as offensive, and you need to define that as threatening, and you need to take down this. That, I think, is exactly the wrong way to go. We don't need less speech. We need more speech. We don't need more political control. We need less political control and more freedom on the internet and everywhere else. So I think that the way to go is not to increase the government involvement, but to break the companies up. I mean, let's get the free market involved again. Let's get some competitors in that space. And the other thing I would say is let's give people the right to sue these companies, these monopolies, if they get deplatformed and they're treated in bad faith. You know, it used to be, I mean, it still is true in every other walk of life, every other industry, that if a company violates its contract with you, you can sue them. Well, with big tech, you can't sue them if they violate their terms of agreement because the federal government protects them, immunizes them. That's Section 230. I think we ought to withdraw that and allow people to sue if they're treated in bad faith by these companies, if these companies violate their terms of service. I think that could be a game changer.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.